Cinematic Spaces of Education Film Festivalette. Oh, by the way, we can start recording. And I think, got it, okay. All right, so welcome to the 2023 Cinematic Spaces of Education Film Festivalette. This is organized in association with the Comparative Education Society. I'm Jorge Baxter, and I'm one of the co-curators of the festival, together here with Adriana Cepeda, and Claudia Bermudez, who's also here on the screen. I'm a professor at the Faculty of Education here at the University of Los Andes in Bogota, Colombia. And we're now in the 9th edition of this festival, 9th edition of the festival. And each year, what we've been trying to do in particular, since we've been co-curating this festival in the last 6 years, we've tried to select films that really help us push our thinking, push the boundaries around questions and issues that that are discussed in comparative education. We are in a new format this year, 2023. I don't know if it has to do in some sense with what you were saying, James. I think viewing cultures are changing and coming out of the pandemic, but the new format this year is all online. The festival will be worldwide, all online for the next 9 months. We will be featuring 8 films that will be open and free to the public worldwide. And around most of those films, we'll be organizing also to discussions with filmmakers, with educators, and with activists, just like we're doing today. We're excited to open the festival with this film, Angels Are Made of Light. It's a stirring and beautiful documentary from Academy Award-winning director James Longley. And it traces the lives of young students and their teachers at a school in Kabul. We decided to launch the festival with this film because of its very humane approach to representing life in a school in Kabul. And also too, because of the way it interweaves broader social, cultural, economic, and political dynamics into that portrayal. As James states elsewhere, he states that a school is a place of learning. It's also a good place to learn about a country. The job of a school is to instill the foundational ideas of society, ideas which in Afghanistan have been the subject of much disputation. Because children's education impacts the future, it is also possible to learn something about the future of Afghanistan by spending time in its schools. We also chose to launch the festival with this film because we're a global education society and we're global educators, and many of us are very concerned with what's happening today in Afghanistan, in particular with regards to education. After several decades of progress, there is a current policy where young women and girls have been banned from studying in schools and universities. And so we felt compelled that it would be important to put a spotlight on Afghanistan in this situation. And we came across your film and were very struck, and not only by its beauty and its portrayal of everyday life of these students and their families, but also of Kabul. And it's an interesting window into Afghanistan. So we're really lucky. We're really fortunate to have with us today the director of the film, James Longley, as well as 2 educators from Afghanistan, Fakhrullah Safari and Sohila Nori. Before I introduce them, just a few logistical announcements. We will be streaming this. We are streaming this now live on YouTube. And those of you who are connecting on Zoom or are here on Zoom, there's Sohila. we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. We're going to open this up for all of you. So you can either do that in the chat if you prefer, but you can also raise your hand and we'll call on you when we open this up. So we encourage all of you to participate at some stage, maybe about 40 minutes in, depending on how the conversation flows. We'd like to turn off the recording in case some of you would prefer not to be recorded and discuss and bring up issues or participate. So we'll let you know when we've stopped recording, and please take that into consideration. So great. So I'd like to introduce.
Okay, sorry, before you go,
Yes.
I think I heard Anna's in the waiting to be let in. There might be one or two others. Just check.
Okay.
They're waiting. There's an issue. 1 second, please. We'll pause for a second.
Yeah, I don't see in the waiting room.
Message.
Also, I should just correct the record and say
Yeah.
that I'm only nominated for the Oscar. I'm not an Oscar winner.
But you won it for a Portrait of a Dog. For me, that counts.
Oh well, yes, that's a student. That's a student.
But it's
student Oscar. It's different, really. It's a different competition. Yeah.
Okay, one
There
second. We're changing hosts to see if there's people waiting somewhere. See if we can let them in.
I'll just check she's in the right space. I just got a message to say she's hanging on.
Let me double check if.
Okay. Hi, Sohila. Welcome.
Hello.
Okay. She's the host now. She's
Okay,
able to
great.
fix it. Okay. All right. Well, I think we can continue. Let me know, Hugh, if perhaps she's in a different room.
I'll send a message in the chat. So let's just go ahead and not worry
Okay.
about.
Great.
Yes.
So let me tell you a little bit about James. He was born in Eugene, Oregon, the west coast of the United States, for those of you not familiar with the geography. He studied film and Russian at Wesleyan University, and also too at VGIK in Moscow. His student documentary, Portrait of a Boy with a Dog, won a Student Academy Award. His first feature documentary film, Gaza Strip, explores the second Palestinian uprising. His celebrated documentaries, Iraqi Fragments, a documentary feature from 2007, was a winner of a jury prize for Best Documentary, and it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Directing, Cinematography, and Editing at Sundance Film Festival. And Sari's Mother was nominated for an Oscar for Best Documentary Short Subject in 2008. And this movie, Sari's Mother, chronicles people living in the aftermath of the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. Longley is a MacArthur Fellow. Welcome, James. And we also have with us Fakrullah Safari. Hello, Fakrullah. Fakrullah has worked for the past 11 years with international NGOs in Afghanistan in various positions related to educational management and education program development. And he's interested in learner-centered approaches to teaching. And he's currently doing his Master of Arts in Teaching at American University in Central Asia. Welcome, Fakrullah. And we have also with us Sohila Nouri, who was born and raised in Kabul, and she's experienced many challenges as a Hazara woman, and she's a passionate advocate for women and minority rights. She's currently a research assistant at the Elkana Center for Teaching, Learning, and Higher Education Research, doing she's doing a master's in economic policy at Central European University. So we're going to quickly show the trailer of the movie, and then we'll jump into the discussion. Give us 1 second here. I think I need to be named host again. in order to be able to share my screen. Okay.
میخوایم راجع به وطن خودم یک کتاب نوشته کنیم. وقتی که ما این شاگردا رو میبینیم موسیقی خدا عالمیه. ما وقتا ما تا دوران از 30 سال قبل دادش کلان شده اولادش تا ایندی وطن است. چرا تا زمین ما میزنیم که حاصل کار ما چی میشه؟ باز سالهای قبلی و جنگ آسان و خیلی زیر پروردگار میسانه چی خود از کلان شده میتونم مثلا داستانی که میخوایم راجع به این دوست و پدر مادر پدر میخوایم اینجا قسم یک کتاب نوشته کنیم.
All right. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Adriana.
We're so pleased to be here with all of you, and thank you again to James, Fakrula, and Sohelia for joining us, and to all of you as well, and to those joining us also if you happen to be streaming on YouTube. James, you have such an interesting life history, and I'm so curious about what led you to Afghanistan. You've filmed in Iraq, you've filmed in Pakistan, I believe you've also spent time in Iran. What led you to Afghanistan? Why did you decide to focus on Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, my whole documentary film career, which I guess kind of started in Russia back in the 90s, has been focused on filming, making movies in places that were somehow in the mind of the United States audience in particular, somehow in the camp of the other or the enemy or something like that. So, hence my first feature documentary was in the Gaza Strip. The United States obviously supports Israel quite firmly, and so I thought it's good for an American audience to see another point of view, the Palestinian point of view, that they don't get to see, and sort of see this reality. And similarly, then when I finished that movie in 2002, it was clear that the United States had already invaded Afghanistan with its military, and was about to invade Iraq. So at that time, I went to I made a choice to go to Iraq before the war, and I made my film. I made 2 films there. But the reason for choosing these subjects was always because, these are the countries where the United States has gone to war, and it was pretty clear to me that most people in the United States just don't know anything about these countries, So it's a strange situation where you have what is supposedly a democracy going to war in places that they really don't know anything about. I mean, at least the British Empire, had the courtesy to sort of educate themselves about the places that they were, but the United States doesn't do that. And to me, it's kind of a shame. And I want to fight. I want to sort of fight against that. I guess that's sort of the basis of everything that I've been doing, is sort of fighting against this kind of enormous, monstrous ignorance in my own country. I'm not really, like, when I go to Afghanistan, for example. In the first place, I'm going there because the United States has had a 20-year war in Afghanistan, and yet at the end of this, we still don't know about Afghanistan. Right now in the United States, they're showing on PBS a 3-part series called America and the Taliban. It's not America and Afghanistan, right? It's America and the Taliban. So they leave out the whole country and all the civilian viewpoint, the 99.8% of the people who aren't really fighters and they're not involved in any of these conflicts. And I think this framing is incorrect. From my point of view, it's the civilian population that I worry about and that I think about. And so I'm really trying to make films from a kind of civilian point of view. And of course, like in the case of Afghanistan, and the reason that we're all gathered together is because you're an educational organization and I made a film in a school. But the real reason, of course, that I'm making a film in a school is because in Afghanistan, you can't really go inside people's houses and make a film. You can't in the culture. But still, as a filmmaker, I'm trying to show a kind of Afghan family, I want a sort of, not just an individual, but a family if possible. And not maybe only a family, but a whole community. And sort of, and a school setting allows me to do that. It's a way in which you can make a film in Afghanistan which will be socially acceptable to the people that you're making the film about. And you can show this kind of broader view of the society. In the United States now, it's very popular. I mean, documentary filmmaking is a business now, right? And there's no separation in the world of filmmaking between documentaries and fiction. Like, they're both expected to entertain the viewer and capture an audience, and they're both expected to make money. So the tendency in the United States is for documentary films to more and more resemble fiction films. And in fiction films, you should have a story, you should have a main character. That main character should want something, and they should face obstacles. And then in the end, they either get what they want or they don't. And so you see a lot of documentary films that are about, competitions of various kinds, this kind of thing, spelling bees and sports, and lots of documentaries about dead or nearly dead rock musicians, because this is the kind of film that you can easily make and easily get financed, because there'll always be a market for this kind of thing. But it's very difficult, and there really isn't any market for losing your ignorance about a country that you've invaded. Right, that's a whole different sort of economic category that hasn't been like fleshed out, within the Hollywood system.
Yes, No, and
So I'll pause there and
yeah, no, I just wanted to say that, that I find, I'm so grateful also for the movie because it transports us to the kind of day-to-day life of Kabul, and through, these 11 characters, we get a sense of the whole kind of struggle of Afghanistan, and with the archival footage that you also include of their history, and it's very refreshing and also quite troubling. And the film itself is a way to educate the viewer. So beyond the schooling aspect, you're also with us because the film is in a way educating us, and we're very interested in those ways of that education crosses borders. And but it is quite challenging for me because I don't know that much about all the details of Afghanistan to understand some of what's there, and it's some of it is suggested in a beautiful way, but to help some of the people that may not know a lot about the context of Afghanistan, Fakrullah, who is joining us from Afghanistan, kindly has offered to provide us some context.
All right, thank you. I'm grateful to the organizers of the event today and for inviting me here. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say something briefly about Afghanistan so that we all can engage in discussion later on in the event today. As you may know, Afghanistan is located at the crossroads of Central Asia and South Asia, with a population of around 32 million, composed of more than 12 ethnic groups, the biggest of whom are Pashtuns, Tajiks, Hazaras, and Uzbeks. And it is said that 99.7% of Afghans are Muslims. Its current form of government since August 2021 can be categorized as theocratic Islamic Emirate. Afghanistan, I think, once a land of hope, is now experiencing the uprooting of hope. While the issue is complex, I think two major contributing factors are girls directed not to attain secondary and higher education, and economic deterioration, which affect millions of Afghans. As a result, an increasing number of school-going male children are being forced into labor, which perpetuates, I think, the cycle of poverty. I personally witnessed this trend going and growing in Kabul, where I'm living now. It is disheartening to see a nation in such a desperate need of help, struggling with poverty and denial of rights. In the film, we can also see that Afghan children are just like any other children in the world, full of hope and challenges. However, future depends greatly on education. It is crucial that we work to ensure that every child in Afghanistan has access to quality education, although some people are just talking about access, not even quality, so that they can break free from the cycle of poverty and build a better future for themselves and for this nation. I think that's what I wanted to share with you for the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fakrullah, for that context and for your comments. We'd like to pass the microphone over to Sohila as a woman and also as a minority and a refugee. It'd be interesting to get your perspective on the film. Sohila.
Yeah, hello everyone. Well done, James. I could get connected to your documentary so much as someone who lived in Afghanistan and who is from Afghanistan. Every part that you try to show in your documentary is indeed true when it comes to the daily life of Afghan citizens in Afghanistan, but I wish it was all. Unfortunately, sometimes the situation gets even worse than what you depicted and showed in your documentary. And nowadays, as my friend just mentioned, by Taliban's ascent to power, the situation just got worse, that you cannot even see, Afghan girls and I don't know, female teachers at the school anymore, which is really heartbreaking. I just want to give a very brief reflection on the documentary itself. And as my friend just mentioned, I think that although the core idea of the documentary was about giving the image of the country which is facing war over and over, but I kind of get this idea that the main problem of the Afghan society in the period that you film your documentary is exactly the poverty, as my friend mentioned, because you can see the effect of poverty, absolute poverty, on the daily life of the Afghan citizens, like child labor, like how it affects on dreaming and access to education and the formations of the family. I think poverty is the key constraint and issue that Afghans had during that period of time. And you clearly mentioned that how lack of knowledge of Afghanistan and Afghan society could lead to a failure of all the efforts that the international community and United States put in order to kind of reconstruct Afghanistan, which was indeed a failure because they didn't have enough knowledge of that. And that is quite all about the movies. And yeah, I kind of believe that the poverty is the main issue for many problems that Afghan children, Afghan families face and are facing nowadays. And it also affects on their education.
Great. Perhaps we can pass it back to James to
Yeah. Well, if you would like me to sort of give political comments about the situation, I can do that, of course. I think what you just said is really true, and we should learn to listen to what Afghans are telling us, which is that in Afghanistan there's a hierarchy of needs just like everywhere else, and the first thing that people need is to be free from poverty and not to worry about how they're going to eat, and then only after this we can start to worry about education. There's the first thing, which is eating, which is basic needs of people. And we're in a kind of paradoxical situation politically because the Taliban is in the process of negotiating with the West, and they know, because we keep on telling them that the most important thing for us is women's education, girls' education. This is the only thing that we talk about in the media when we talk about Afghanistan. It's the first thing. If you say Afghanistan, people will say, oh, girls don't have the right to go to school. And so the Taliban know that this is really important for the West, at least in public. And so they use it as a tool in their negotiation process. They can take girls' education off the table and say, okay, this is something that they can use to bargain with. And I think it's important for people in the West also to sort of understand the underlying psychology in places like Iran, in places like Afghanistan, which is that you cannot force anyone to do anything, right? This is the main thing. In these cultures, respect is the important thing, number one. And so if you're telling someone, you must do this, not because it's your pleasure, but because I'm telling you to do it, they will never do it. So politically, it's the wrong strategy for the West. Look, I mean, from the Taliban point of view, they fought a war for 20 years with the United States, at least 20 years, and they won the war. In the end, the United States had to give in and say, yes, we prefer that you have power, actually. They handed the power to them. And now the Taliban doesn't feel that they should have to take orders about what to do in Afghanistan because they've won the war and now they're in power. And so this is really kind of a psychological and also a negotiations thing which is happening with Afghanistan. Afghan people know that girls should go to school. And the Taliban also knows this, and they also have daughters and they want them to be educated. But this is just the political situation that we have created for ourselves, which is making the situation worse actually for Afghans. And the first thing that we should be doing is finding ways at least not to hurt the economy of Afghanistan. Business people in Afghanistan need to be able to make transfers, to be able to import wheat from some neighboring country, or to do any kind of business. They need to be able to use the SWIFT system. And the United States is, because it really controls all of the international banking, the United States is directly and indirectly making it difficult for people to move money to Afghanistan. And even if you are the WFP, you can't just move money to a bank account or something like that. Even the NGOs are having trouble navigating the banking situation which has been created in the wake of our withdrawal. So my feeling is, in agreement with what we've heard from the Afghans, is that solving this problem of poverty has to be number one. And if the problem of poverty is made less in Afghanistan, and if Afghanistan is less dependent on foreign aid, it's more likely in that situation that you're going to have a political evolution that tends toward more rights for women, for example. This is my opinion. I don't think that you can force Afghanistan to have women's rights. You may care about it, and you may say, it's terrible that there are not the same rights for women in Afghanistan that there are in my country, but you can't do anything about it. The only thing you can do is try to help the economy of Afghanistan and help Afghanistan be more integrated into the world system somehow. Not to say that you like everything that the government does, but Afghanistan would not be also the first country in the world where the government does things that people don't like. I mean, the United States, for example, is good friends with Saudi Arabia, which has very strict punishments for, I don't know, women doing anything or anyone violating their rules. And we also have terrific support for countries like Israel, which, Israel is an apartheid state. So it's simply not the case that every country that we recognize and every country that we have relations with is going to, necessarily be a country where everything is done the way we like. I think we should be thinking about the people of Afghanistan and not reducing Afghanistan down to the government of Afghanistan, because there are really a small number of people, and those people have everything that they need. They have all the food they need. They have the latest mobile phones. They are rich, the Taliban. We don't need to worry about them. We should be worrying about what's happening to the people of Afghanistan. Okay. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. And I think your movie helps highlight and spotlight those everyday people and the everyday citizens. And again, I think that's one of the things that we loved about your film. I'd like to pass it over to Fakrullah and Sohila for one question each, and then we're going to open it up to the audience, to those that are connected here. Fakrullah or Sohila, do you have a question for James or another comment based on the discussion thus far?
Yeah, I can go. You can go.
Please go ahead.
Actually, it's not a question, but it is just like a comment. When I was watching the documentary, I was really impressed by the movement from the past to the present. When you were how the time passes and how the life of Afghans are being affected by every single political revolution or the changes that are coming, and how their lives got affected. In your documentary, actually, it was just the idea of the characters, that what if Taliban get the power once again, what would happen for us, what would happen in future, and it was just their prediction and their thoughts. And unfortunately now the Taliban got the control and everything is just changed all in a sudden. So my point is, are you planning maybe to make another documentary of how, despite the fact that everyone was kind of dreaming for a better Afghanistan, but we are just going toward a very worse situation that we never thought about? At least me as an Afghan girl, I never thought that it would come a day that Afghan girls are not allowed to go to school, or you cannot travel, or you cannot work, and how these political things affect their life. Are you planning to kind of make another documentary of how the situation would be changed? And now, to be honest, it is not only the fault of the government and the Afghans, but also the fault of the many international, I don't know, powers, other countries, that they had really significant impact on what we are facing today. And it was their failure as well. So we need more voices to actually say that, okay, you just made an experiment with Afghanistan and you are leaving behind millions of people back there with hoping to, I don't know, getting access to very fundamental rights like education, which is insane. Are you planning to make such a documentary to be the voice of the people who are really feeling being backward and missed in this world? I don't know. I was just thinking about that during watching your documentary.
Yeah. Well, I have been back working on another project. I was in Afghanistan for 6 months last year, and I was just in Afghanistan for another 2 weeks, renewing my documents. So yeah, I'm working on a new project. I can't really talk about it, but of course, I mean, now in Afghanistan, there are more. I would say it's a similar process to have permission for filming. Actually, the ministry situation is like almost the same, just different people at the top. Many of the people inside the ministry are the same people as before, and you know. But the challenge, I think, is yeah, politically things have become a bit more strict, I think. But I have to say, you know. The change is mixed, because obviously most people don't like the policies of the Taliban, too strict for the culture of people in places like Kabul. But there are also some benefits, you know, to having the United States gone, and which is the war is over, and this is a benefit for people. Now you can drive on the roads, and crime is less, these kinds of things. And so it is possible now to go outside of Kabul, like as a foreigner, where in the past you could not really go and make a film in, you know, in Kandahar or something like that, or in, I don't know, in Zabul. You couldn't go there and spend a lot of time. But now the situation, it's like a lot more secure in Afghanistan, actually, than in the past, because the war is over.
Yeah, but
so this is one thing. Yeah, it's a cold peace. You are right. I mean, it's possible now. You don't have to be afraid of insurgents, you know, now, because the war is gone. But there are other things to worry about, you know, like these restrictions, and also, as you say, the poverty. So some things are better, some things are worse. The change is happening, but I think, yeah, I am working on a new project. Of course, I can't be the voice for everyone, let's say, but I would like to remind people about the fact that there are, you know, that Afghanistan is a bunch of civilians. This is something that we forget. And that, you know, they remain the same people even after the Taliban takeover. You know, I think in the United States, especially, there's a psychological thing where we just want to forget about Afghanistan, like a bad dream, because we went there and we tried something and we weren't exactly sure what it was, and then we were sort of humiliated and driven out in a way. I mean, that's how it appears. And so now, you know, people don't really want to talk about it. I don't know. It was years and years after the Vietnam War, for example, before people started to make these sort of critical films about the war. You know.
I think in interest of time, I think what I'm going to do is open it up, and then Fakrullah, if you want to jump into during the conversation, but let's open it up to the broader public here and take questions. So, okay.
Someone has a hand
Okay.
raised.
Claudia, please go ahead. You're on mute, Claudia. Yeah. There you go.
Hi, hello. Thanks, James, for your film. I really loved it, enjoyed it, learned a lot. My question is not really about Afghanistan and the situation, although I believe your answer will be related to it somehow. But I want to ask about narrative choices you made for the film. It's very beautiful, it's very aesthetic, it's very poetic, I believe. And when I was watching it, I was always thinking of why the thought you made, the choice you made for like it's all told in off, like characters are very seldom speaking in. It's like a mental conversation all the time, very profound, very poetic. We were talking about poverty right now, but I think they're not poor in terms of reflection, in terms of knowledge somehow, in terms of wanting to live. So I'd like to hear about why you chose this specific narrative for the film.
You mean the technique of using voiceover?
Yeah,
It's
and
because
very poetic.
well, I chose. You know, I recorded so like none of it is scripted. Of course, it's all real. But in order to get that narration, I recorded, you know, many interviews, and like with, you know, the main character Sorab, this kid, now he's, you know, 20 something, but at that time it was difficult. Like in the beginning when we were recording him, he never really said anything interesting. It took almost a year of recording him before we really started to get the stuff which is used in the film. And it was like we recorded over 100 interviews, just audio without any video. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I mean, people are much more comfortable with the microphone. They can kind of forget about a microphone, whereas with the camera, people are, if you point a camera at someone, I mean, it can be quite intimidating for the non-professional. And so, and the other thing is, you know, when you only have a microphone and you don't have a camera, you don't have to worry about the microphone getting in the shot or something like that. So you can put it like where it should be, and you can get really good sound. And I really like the idea of having the voice inside someone's head. Because I don't know about you. I mean, some people, I guess I've heard that some people walk around and they don't have any kind of internal narration, and that, you know, inside their mind is complete silence. But I've heard that there are such people. But for myself, I mean, I always have an internal thought process going on. And so I wanted to, as best I could, sort of replicate that with the people in the film, and record all of these interviews. You know, like with the old teacher Nick Mohammed, for example, so many interviews at my house, at his house. We would just get together and have lunch and record interviews, and it was like a large part of the work is never on video. And then of course, I translated everything, and the transcript for the film is 8,000 pages. I sat with the Afghan guys that I was working with, and we went sentence by sentence through all of the video and all of the audio interviews and translated everything. It's like an encyclopedia. So then I have this material which in editing we, you know, sort of reduced down to the core ideas. And, you know, like one of the core ideas is as Sohila. Is that I'm pronouncing it wrong? Sohila? Yeah, as you were saying, the idea that the Taliban are going to take over and that as soon as the Americans leave, they're going to have the same problems as before, and that the future of Afghanistan is like an Islamic government. All of this is stated in the film. You know, that the reason there's a war in Afghanistan is because of the Americans, and that what we really want is something, not the Americans and not the Taliban, and this will be the best thing. Like, I'm trying to reflect the really big ideas that like majority of Afghans agree with. You know what I mean? They don't want a foreign occupation, but they also don't want strict like Islamic rule also, because it's not like the culture of that most people agree with. So you know, in the film, I'm trying to get these big ideas that are true, and that Afghan people will agree with. Like I'm trying to make a film that has a Venn diagram where we're in that space that, you know, like foreigners will learn something, and Afghans will look at this film and say, this is like if an Afghan person made a film. Like, I agree with the things they say here. These are not, you know, this isn't against Afghanistan. It's not trying to paint some wrong picture of Afghanistan. So I'm trying to do both things at the same time with the movie. And I don't know, I can only sit in judgment, sit in and be judged by others about whether or not I succeeded.
Thank you, James. We have a question from Hugh McLean. Hugh, you're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, thank you very much for that. So firstly, of course, quickly, the poverty. Yes, I mean, you know, America was responsible for the war. I mean, they're 20 years. The sanctions are causing the policy. So I'd like you are causing poverty as well. So I'd like to comment on that, among other things. But I mean, I think they're a big factor. But I was really interested in your focus on the people in this, James, and also going back right to your early work. If you take something like Gaza Strip 20 years ago, I think the character there was young Mohammed Hijazi or something, and he would be in his mid-30s now. So I was interested in those people and how you speak about them and how you keep in touch with them. But of course, the big thing for us looking at the film is to think about what's happened to the school now. You know, this was 5 years before the Taliban take back, or a few years before. Five. So what's happened? What happened to the schools? What happened to that wonderful principal? And you know, what has happened to the boys in that school? Has things changed? And do you know?
Right. Well, I mean, of course, technology has completely changed during the time that I've been making films. So whereas in Gaza Strip, you know, people didn't have smartphones and Facebook and Instagram and these things. Now they do, you know what I mean? Like at that time, like in Afghanistan, I mean, most people didn't even, you know, most people didn't have a TV or, you know, and to have a telephone in your house was unusual. But now everyone has a smartphone. Even some kids are walking around with their smartphones in Afghanistan. So the situation is totally different in terms of keeping in touch with people. I was in Gaza again in 2009 after Operation Cast Lead, as it's called by the Israelis, and I tried to find Mohammed Hijazi, but I wasn't able to. You know, it was kind of a chaotic time, and the people I was working with, they hadn't worked on the previous film, and so they didn't know. It was harder for them to locate him. But like the people in the films I made in Iraq and this, I'm not in touch with them directly, but I've sometimes the people I worked with in the past, they'll go back to Iraq and they'll visit them and send me pictures and news. So I know that, you know, the kid in Baghdad is married and has 2 little kids, for example. So yeah, people grow up. I mean, you film them as kids and they grow up. I mean, this is the way life is. And it's, you know, I get a lot of like on this Iraq film, for example, I get a lot of YouTube comments from people who were not yet born or were infants at the time that I made the film, and they're the cousin of someone in the movie, and they'll be watching their relative on screen as a child, and for them it's kind of a treat. It's like a home movie, you know, like a family film. And I think this is maybe the most. Maybe this is the most valuable aspect of the film, is that it means something really personal to the people who are in it after some time has passed. They're maybe the best audience to think about as a filmmaker. The future versions of the people that you're filming.
The news of the school, though, I think I asked so many things.
Oh yeah, right. News of the school. Yeah, so I arranged some funding for the school when the Taliban took over. There was a big collapse, and a lot of people were donating things. So I routed a lot of food aid donations and firewood donations and a whole truckload of aid to the school on like 2 occasions. And when I went back there, of course, I went and I visited them, and there were tears, and but I didn't know the school. It looks older, and now I guess now at the time I visited, there were still women teachers working there, and I think now probably there are none, as far as I know. So yeah, but I'm still in touch, of course, with all of the people that I filmed in Afghanistan. And yeah, I try to stay in touch with, and I'm also in touch with all the people I worked with. So it becomes this huge extended family after you make a bunch of films. A lot of them, the guy I worked with in Iran, I helped to move to the Netherlands, and people I worked with in Afghanistan are now in Canada and the United States and the UK and these places. And yeah, it's becoming a diaspora of a kind.
I don't want to monopolize, but I just want to make one comment about, obviously it's your sensibility for children from, from the Gaza Strip through Iraq in pieces, I think, through to this. There's an enormous sense of young people facing their futures. And as an educator, I just appreciate that enormously. It's interesting to see that sensibility, and it's interesting that that in a way is such a part of the tradition of the filmmaking in the region. If you look at all the great Iranian films on children in movies, and a lot of the other stuff done by people like Mark Cousins and that on children and education and views into politics of the region through that mechanism.
Well, yeah, for sure. Like I grew up watching, my favorite film maybe was like The 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut, which is about sort of growing up and education, and figures very prominently in that movie. And films like Where Is the Friend's House by Abbas Kiarostami, Children of Heaven. Also is a great film, which is very school focused, and it's just this is a really rich sort of palette to work with as a filmmaker, and as a documentary filmmaker. Of course, I'm completely inspired by these fiction movies, which are not really fiction. Those are also kind of documentaries, right? Like in a way. So I'm just I'm approaching it as a kind of purist documentarian, but who likes what fiction does a lot more than what documentary usually tries to do.
Great. We have a question. Yeah. Someone raised her hand. Marta Mogilpor, please. Go ahead, Marta.
Hello, hi.
Hello.
I'm Martha. I'm from India. And I'm actually in the field. I work in the field of education and hoping to make films. But I was really, really so touched by, as Claudia was saying, the descriptions that the children had, and the way they were sharing. I was just wondering, like, how the process was of even selecting the children, and these were like, they seemed like they're in 6th and 7th grade, so they're adolescents, and they're generally considered childlike, but then they were really so deep and thoughtful in the way, like, their aspirations and the way they were processing their experiences. And really I found that it really showed the capacity and the strength that age group has, and that's often that power and capacity is generally overlooked in the field of education. And so as I really found, so I was just wondering what the process was like of even like selecting, which students and even the process of when you, as you said, you spoke to them for many hours and to really reach that point, because it takes a lot of like, I felt like it was very intimate what they shared, and it's not very easy to bring that out. I mean, I'm sure but it'd just be great to learn from your experience. And
for sure. I mean, we spent a lot of time with them. I was in Afghanistan for 3.5 years. So, and the whole time that I was there, 3 years of production, and like 6 months of just finding the right school. We looked at hospitals, we looked at schools, we looked at orphanages. I looked at schools in the village, schools in the city, schools in new neighborhoods, schools in old neighborhoods. It wasn't like I just sort of arrived there and immediately started. Like there's a lot of and I went along, and we would go and we would visit a school, and I would photograph all of these. They would bring a bunch of kids for us to talk to, and then I would take pictures of all of them. It was like casting. It was like casting a fiction film, and location scouting as well, right? Like I'm choosing a location which it will be easy to film in, which has good light, which has something happening. Like in that school, they had built, they'd put up these UNHCR tents in the courtyard of a mosque and made a school. And they were moving from there to a new school that they were building. So there was like a process that was going on, which made it more interesting, right? So all of these things. And so then once I had chosen this location, then of course, we started asking like, okay, so like who's the cleverest kid, who is the best speaker, this kind of thing. And we couldn't get permission to film the cleverest kid in school. So in the end, one of the teachers said, well, why don't you film my kids? And we thought it's convenient because she's a teacher, and she has these multiple children, and if one of them can't express themselves on in an interview, maybe one of the other ones can. And I don't know, in documentary film you have to you have to do a bit of hedging, because you don't know the people. Like you can't force anyone. I'm not paying them, you know what I mean? So you can't force people to be in your movie. They have to want to be in your movie. They have to say, somehow on balance, I think that this is good for me and my family. They have to agree with this idea, and because even if you see someone and you think, wow, this is a really interesting person, I want to make a film about them, it doesn't mean that you can. You have to agree with people who actually will be in your film for not maybe 1 year, but 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? It takes it's a whole process of diplomacy with people and their families and extended families and their neighbors. You are in India, you know how it is, right? Like everyone minds other people's business. You know what I mean? So you have to be part of the community, and everyone has to accept you. Otherwise, the family will get in trouble, and they will say, we have to stop filming. You know what I mean? So it's your job as a filmmaker to solve all of these problems before they even happen. And in that neighborhood, I would go to the head of the neighborhood, the sort of village leader inside that neighborhood, and have lunch with them. And you have to show respect to everyone. You have to give everyone a chance to talk with you and find out who you are. And this is the only way to do it in a place like Afghanistan, because it's everybody's business. It's not like in the United States where you go into someone's house and what happens inside that house is not the business of the neighbors. Nobody asks about it. In Afghanistan, what happens inside everybody's house is the business of everybody else. And so it's better to film on the streets.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And in schools, in public places. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In a place like Afghanistan, it's about finding a way to make a good film that is also practically possible to make, because
Okay, we have a question from Farkula. Fakrula asks about, well, first he states that many people, and I'm reading between the lines, in Afghanistan would feel attached to this film in the sense that it talks to most of us as students in Afghanistan. And he asks around the emotional aspects of how you created perhaps those emotional attachments in the way that you tell this story. I think that's your
sorry,
question.
I'm not sure I understood exactly.
My question is: is there any part of the film that you feel particularly touched by? Is that your question, Fakrullah?
He says that his internet is not working so well, so I think that's why he wrote it in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess how
So
do you create that in?
He turned it on.
Okay, go ahead, Fakrullah.
Sorry, I think it's okay now. James, thank you. I think I really enjoyed this movie. I was saying that as a student myself, long time ago, when I was watching the movie, I was feeling that it's about me as a student when I was younger. My question was that when you were filming, you were in the class with those kids, and also when the students were working outside the school to support the family. Was there any part of the process when you were filming that you were getting a bit emotional, seeing the difficulty or a bit like the challenges these people were facing as students?
Yeah, I don't know. Of course, well, the strange thing about humans is, we get used to anything. And so once you're in Afghanistan for a while, the situation of Afghanistan becomes normal, like just if you're like an Afghan person. I was there for 3 years, and it's enough time to just sort of get used to the idea that, there are kids working in the auto repair shop. This is just the way life is, you know what I mean? Of course, when I came there at first, I was like looking out of the car window as we were driving around saying, there's so many kids, working as blacksmiths. And the guy I was with, the Afghan guy I was with, he just says, well, they have to do this, otherwise they'll die. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. This is the situation that people are faced with. It's a reality. And if you want to change it, you can't change it by being just, emotional. You have to think about sort of the root causes of the whole situation. But of course, I don't know. I chose this subject because because it's frankly uplifting. If you're going to be in a place like Afghanistan, which is in a difficult situation, in a way, the most positive experience you can have is to be like in a school around all these teachers and all these kids, and it's like you're in a big house with an extended family, and everybody knows everybody else, and there are these, it's great. I'm an introvert, but being behind the camera, it allows me to sort of be in this social situation without having to, with a kind of protection, a kind of filter. It allows me to be there, and for me that's the gift. You know what I mean? I'm choosing these kinds of subjects because, not only for the audience I think is it interesting, but also for me it's what I prefer to do instead of working, I don't know, filming in a coal mine or something like that.
James, we have a question from Vanessa Sperduti in the chat. She's very interested in learning more about how you communicated. Did you learn any of the local languages, or did you have a translator or several translators? I'm guessing that there are cultural communication issues, not just linguistic.
Right. I had the benefit of living, for 2 years in Iraq, and 4 months in Gaza, and a year in Iran, especially, and a year in Pakistan before I ever arrived in Afghanistan. So culturally, Afghanistan is different from those places, but there's a lot of similarity between like Iran and Afghanistan. And also Dari is basically, a more traditional form of Farsi. So I had, some familiarity linguistically by the time I arrived there, but really my only real foreign language is Russian. I can't really claim to speak Dari or Pashto or anything, because I sort of, like, my last film was in Dari. The film I'm working on now is in Pashto. So it's like I could try to like learn a language, but then any of my gains would just be erased by the next movie. But of course, I mean, I pick a little bit up, but the problem, like, I'm always working with a translator, and I become like the silent one with the camera. And so I can understand a lot of what goes on, but in order to speak it, I mean, my speaking is not great. After I sit and translate an entire movie's worth of material, I feel like at the end of that, I'm really beginning to get a hang of, like a sort of a concrete idea about the language. But my speaking, like, I just don't have enough practical speaking experience. Like, everyone wants to learn English, so. Yeah, there's another question there that I didn't answer. I forget.
Vanessa wrote, "Thank you for the context. There are many layers that go into making a documentary movie, and I was very curious about this communication piece. Thank you." And unfortunately, the hour flew by. I think, at least I would like to stay here. I think maybe more people would also like to continue speaking with James. But the hour has passed that we had planned. Does anybody have one more burning question? We had originally planned to stop recording and stop streaming, but the time really passed very quickly. So if it's okay, we have one more question and then we can close. Jorge, who's also a great photographer, noticed that you're the cinematographer for the movie, and the use of light is really so beautiful, and symbolic, I think, also. And so we would love to hear more about that, about working as a cinematographer and your choice of the use of light, and it's in the title also.
Well, they say the sun is the best gaffer. So I just filmed everything like outside in the daytime, basically. I mean, that was my strategy. There are no lights, there are no tripods in the film, and everything is shot at 5600 Kelvin. It's a really, like, with one lens. I mean, it's a really simple movie, but I just relied on natural lighting, and we chose the location because it had this beautiful texture, and it looked amazing, at 7 o'clock in the morning. So that's a part of it, is just choosing a good location, and then I'm not trying to film it like a documentary. I'm trying to film it like a fiction film. So everything I'm shooting is like, I look at something that's happening. There's a classroom scene, a class is happening in school, or whatever it is. There's a morning assembly, and I'll break it down into the shots, because I'm also an editor, so I know I have a good idea about what I'm going to need on the editing table. And so I'm looking at a real situation, and I'm seeing where are my characters, what I mean, where, and then I imagine it like a fiction film. I was like, well, if this were happening in a fiction film, how would I film it? Essentially, I mean, I'm not directly asking myself that, like, question like that, but that's basically what it is. I'm breaking down real scenes into storyboards, like a comedy, so that I can make a film out of these pieces that is in the language of cinema that people are used to.
And there's some really stunning, captivating images that we loved. Martha has apparently a burning question. Martha?
Sorry, just linked to what you were saying. Like, one thing I noticed maybe was how, like, you know, even in the very close-up shots where these, you know, these two boys are talking, you know, something like they weren't affected by the camera, like, or even in the wider shots where like there are people passing by or just like in the market, you know, somehow the camera was as if it was hidden, or you know, I just wonder how you did that.
Well,
I don't know anything. Yeah.
This is like, it's a stylistic choice to have an invisible camera. Like you know, when you make films, you just make rules for yourself. You have to have some kind of like internal consistency. And so, you know, my rule, and it was difficult because I was editing in Denmark and the Danes don't like to follow instructions. But from foreigners, you know, but my rule was, you know, I didn't want anyone acknowledging the camera, and because I thought it would be distracting for the viewer. Like, I wanted to give the viewer the impression of being in the scene somehow by magic, and that it's real. Like, none of these people are actors. There's no script. It's all real. It's all happening. But the camera isn't there somehow. Like, you can have a movie camera in a, you know, so that's the magic trick that I want to pull off, right? So, so if you're a filmmaker, then you have to think, okay, well, how am I going to do it? And the only way to do it is just to spend a lot of time. You get people used to you. You're there with your camera, even when you're not filming. You're just spending hours and hours and hours. And every day you just show up and you're in this classroom, and they get used to, no one can be on stage all the time. They get tired of posing for you, and they just become themselves. And then, of course, in the 50% of the time where they are paying attention to the camera, you just cut all of that material out of the film because you have 500 hours of stuff. I have like, I could have made a 4 or 5 hour film that would have been, to me, completely watchable with the material that I had. I had all these characters that are cut out of the movie. There was this little kid with this amazing kind of characters, like all this energy. He was like 9 or 10 years old, and he would be running around the streets of Kabul, selling his mother's, you know, stuffed bread, this bolani, and he was terrific. And he had this gravelly voice with all this vocal fry, you know, and we cut him out of the film because we just didn't have, it was already a 2-hour movie, you know what I mean? We didn't even try to edit his stuff. He was great. Like, we had characters like this who were sort of yin and yang. There was one guy who was sort of like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, you know, he was always depressed. You know, and so the two of them together were this great pair. I don't know. I had a lot of fun. Like, it was like, I don't know. There's so much more in the material than what you see on the screen. You know what I mean? In all of those interviews with different people, especially, you know, the older teachers, the woman who narrates the Civil War. She has all these stories about being a girl during the time of the king, and her father worked in the palace as a pastry chef, and she would be, as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old girl, delivering his lunch in a lunch pail to the palace. And she has all these stories about being inside the palace as a little girl. You know what I mean? All of that just had to, like, we could have animated it as a short film or something. You know, there's a kid who describes being in a suicide bombing that kills his brother. We had to cut it out of the movie. You know, there's 1,000 things like that I feel like they're just, I wish I could hold on to them somehow. They're precious to me, and they're lost. You know what I mean? They're still on a hard drive somewhere, but people just don't have the capacity to absorb all of the stuff that you can, you know, that you can collect about a place, you know, and know about a place. It's so much more than what the sort of the general public is prepared to think about, I guess. But I do have, I mean, I dream, you know, because we, like, as people, were capable of watching, you know, completely stupid stuff for season after season, like, I don't know, Tiger King or something. And I dream about being able to make a documentary about something really real, that really tells the truth about an important situation, that people would watch with the same kind of fanaticism.
Thank you so much, James. And I hope that you are able to do that. Maybe a series.
I would love it.
Please do let us know if that happens. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you to everybody for joining us. If you haven't seen the movie yet, there is time still until tomorrow, midnight Eastern Standard Time, or if you'd like to recommend it to students, friends, family, please do so. We really think it's important for people to see this movie.
Mhm.
And
I think also too on James's website, there's some links where you can also get the film.
You can see it for free.
okay. Oh.
2 years of this movie. It was $200.
Okay, so if you can see it
yeah.
on our website by tomorrow, please look for it later and
Yeah,
share.
yeah.
And
thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure and a lot of fun. And people can see the film for free on my website if they go there, jameslongley.com. And it's inside the one of the photo galleries about Kabul. And so, I encourage anyone watching this to, if they haven't seen the film, to go and check it out. It's free. Or if you have money and you want to pay for it, it's also, there's a link to the Apple iTunes version of it.
okay, great.
Yeah.
And also some publicity for the upcoming movie.
Mm-hmm.
So on Sunday, our next film for the festival will be accessible, and the film is called School of Hope. It's set in Morocco by the director Mohamed El Aboudi, and it continues with a Muslim context, but a very different setting, a nomadic tribe, one-room school, and a teacher dealing with a no water situation, as well as the community. And there's a female girl character, and there's some issues around her going to school as well, if you're interested in that subject. So hopefully you will continue with us in the festival and watch the next movie, and join us for the next live session with the director, Mohamed El Aboudi, in 3 weeks, Friday, May 5th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank
A
you, James.
pleasure.